Hey guys, it's me again. This is my third time trying to rewrite this video because at this point I really don't know what I want my YouTube channel to be like at this point. But I've decided that the best way to approach this is to try and not go on an unhinged schizo ramble about Kenshi Lore for 30 minutes and to somehow kind of structure this into a video format, which is a very tough task when talking about Kenshi Lore, because Kenshi Lore inherently is a vaguely coherent, schizophrenic mess of different factions and levels of civilizational collapse and rebuilding, and all sorts of weird fucking factions that don't make sense. Like, this game has robots that wear human skin and humans that wear robot parts that convince themselves that they're robots. But today we're gonna try and cover, one of the minor factions in Kenshi, because you'll find a lot of lore videos about major factions such as the United Cities or the Holy Nation, but there's not a lot of ones covering the little guys, which are actually probably the interesting parts of Kenshi Lore itself. You can tell people that Kenshi is a game about desert samurai fighting knights in a 100-year-long holy war, and they're like, okay, that's kind of cool, right? But it's still a little bit underselling some of the crazy shit you'll find in Kenshi. So today we're going to be discussing the Cannibals of the North, as well as one of my favorite factions, the Shrieking Bandits. So today I'm going to try to explain the lore of the cannibal factions in Kenshi without sounding like a complete schizo, which is a very difficult task if you know anything about Kenshi or have played Kenshi before. So let's go. The cannibals on a surface aesthetic level are pretty easy to understand as a faction. As you can see, they cover themselves in scary, rudimentary armor. They typically use weapons such as hooks and meat cleavers, and they exist in a lower tech form of society than a lot of the other factions in Kenshi, and they kind of exist as one of the big scary factions of oh, don't travel to the north or else you'll get fucking eaten by tribes of cannibals. The Shrieking Bandits are similar, where it's those same cannibals, but at this point they've slowly started to rebuild more of a society in a way that is completely alien to any of the other human factions on Kenshi, and I think that's what makes the Shrieking Bandits, especially in the Shrieking Bandits expanded mod, so interesting, is because it's those same cannibals, but they have formed more of a functioning society than the cannibals in the cannibal tribes, where it's just loosely based on the strong eats the weak. Most forms of post-apocalyptic fiction that have humans in them typically have some form of cannibal faction. You can think back to the cannibals in the Fallout games, or these guys aesthetically kind of have a similar vibe to, all the road bandits in Mad Max and things like that. They're really there to kind of hammer home how much society has regressed and just how ruthless the desert that Kenshi exists in is. And I could get into why including a cannibal tribe is such a brilliant thing to do, especially in a game like Kenshi, where it's multiple forms of societies and governments clashing with one another in a post-apocalyptic setting. But frankly, I don't think I'm intelligent enough to do that topic justice. And obviously aesthetically they're pretty easy to cover, yes, they will take you back to their camps and they will eat you. The topic I find more interesting and worth discussing is the fact that Kenshi's cannibals have somewhat of an interesting origin story. The cannibal tribes in Kenchi are not really indigenous to the planet. It's more of a development that occurred over 1,000 years with the collapse of the Second Empire. And that's kind of why I chose the cannibals as the first sub-faction that I kind of wanted to talk about, is because they kind of are a branching point into talking about a lot of the other history in Kenshi, and it gives me a good baseline to build off of. Lore-wise in Kenshi, if you want to know why anything is fucked up, you pretty much don't have to look much further than the collapse of the Second Empire. What is the Second Empire, Levi? You might be asking. The Second Empire is the rebuilding of civilization that occurred after the magically technological and spacefaring First Empire collapsed in civil warring. I don't plan to cover the First Empire in today's video. There are a lot of other actual Kenshi lore YouTubers that do the entire history of the planet Kenshi way better than I could. But basically all we need to know is that the Second Empire was a fairly well along society. It had a pretty high level of technology, and then eventually a bunch of shit started happening that caused the Second Empire to completely collapse and turn into a horrid dictatorship, so much so that any remains of the Second Empire are still wanted even today, thousands of years later, in the Third Empire. Basically, the main bad guy of Kenshi is a robot man named Catlon, and you can kind of think of this character as, if you've played Dark Souls, kind of like Lord Gwyn, where they weren't really a bad guy, but them trying to stave off the inevitable perpetual collapse of their society led them to do a bunch of atrocities to where now they are the main villain of the game. Lord Gwyn was only trying to stave off the coming age of darkness. It's kind of similar with Catlon. Catlon was only trying to stave off the inevitable collapse of his Second Empire, which he considered the last bastion of society and hope for humanity after it crashed and marooned on the planet Kenshi. Basically, wars with a newly formed religion from the Chaos Age and bandits eventually continually broke down the Second Empire's supply chains until the entire empire that spanned pretty much the entire continent of Kenshi started breaking down rapidly. What this ended up causing was that the entire northern portion of the map began to starve rapidly. We're talking about millions, even possibly a billion people starving in an area where there's absolutely no food, no way to grow food, and just shit's absolutely fucked. So what did they do? Well, they resorted to cannibalism, obviously. This is sort of what makes Kenshi's cannibals a little more interesting than other cannibals in other games, because a lot of other cannibals in fictional media are portrayed as kind of either indigenous tribes that have always kind of been taking part in cannibalism, or they're portrayed as, like, you know, hills have eyes, like, oh, how could these people have just started doing a cannibalism? Kenshi's cannibals are interesting in that it's the end result of 1,000 years of people having no other option but to eat one another. And that ended up devolving society in such a way to where now the end result, when you go to the Cannibal Plains, is a bunch of tribes of cannibals with their own language, kind of perpetually in a forever war with one another, where they just kill each other and eat each other, and they will eat you too if you wander into their territories. But then again, this is just what we see as the outsider perspective. We never get to play as a cannibal faction, and we never get to really see the intricacies of how their societies function. All we know is that there's a bunch of scary fucking cannibals up in the north that will eat you if you go up there. And it's one of the reasons why I really love Kenshi factions, is because it's really hard to talk about these factions and not have it sound really bad. It borders on almost being kind of, what would you call it, like insensitive or, like racist, kind of like the, the cannibals on, like, something like, Skull Island, but what I like about the cannibals in Kenshi is that it makes it less about, like, culture or race, and just about, like, the perpetual decay of human civilization, causing a revert back to monkey. But that's kind of why I find the cannibal faction in Kenshi a little better and more interesting than other cannibals in other fictional media, whereas most cannibals you find in fiction are either just a racist portrayal of an indigenous tribe, or just rednecks in the woods who have inbred for too long. The cannibals in Kenshi are kind of a weird mix of both of those, while trying to be not those at the same time. Like the cannibals in Kenshi are there for a very good reason, and you kind of, at the end of the day, just end up feeling sorry for them. That being said, the Cannibals are one of the most interesting factions in Kenshi, and I think they exist as a really good zeitgeist to kind of discuss more interesting factions in Kenshi. But the Cannibals really do serve a really specific and nuanced purpose in Kenshi, because Kenshi, at the end of the day, is a game about a bunch of clashing ideologies, clashing forms of government, and peoples from various levels of technology fighting for resources on a barren post-apocalyptic moon planet. And that's why I think that the setting of Kenshi would be a lot weaker as a result if they weren't included in the game. Kenshi as a planet is a lot more intimidating and scary because a third of it is taken up by cannibals. Just like many of the other factions exist to enrich the setting, I think that the cannibal factions in Kenshi do a great job at enriching the setting of Kenshi, while also surprisingly being one of the least racist portrayals of cannibals I've seen in fiction. I could pretty much keep yapping about this forever, but I think that's the most concise version of what I wanted to say about the cannibals in Kenshi. I think in the future I might do some more videos yapping about Kenshi factions, depending on how this one does. Sometimes I think the algorithm knows who I am at this point, so they're not going to show my videos to anybody. But if you actually end up watching this, and you aren't an asshole who just comments, "Wow, this guy be yapping for 12 minutes," and you actually do want to hear me talk about why I think other factions in Kenshi are interesting, let me know. Because I've really been questioning where I want this YouTube channel to go. I don't know if it's sustainable to just keep making Kenshi videos, if I want to do my own thing, but I figured it'd be a fun plan to try and do some videos on minor factions in Kenshi, and just kind of give you a surface level explanation as to why I think they're so interesting, while also trying very hard not to go into a complete schizophrenic meltdown rant that takes 20 minutes. Anyways, if you guys got this far, thank you so much. If you weren't subscribed, I would really appreciate a subscription. My personal goal for this year was to have reached 1,000 subscribers. And now that we're at the end of the year, I don't think we're gonna make that goal. We might throw out a real banger at the end of the year that does real well. But just commenting or leaving a like or subscribing to show that you at least somewhat enjoyed the topic of Kenshi really helps me out, as in 2024, in a world of Asmongold's and $1 million YouTube channels, I really don't know why I do this sometimes, so other than for my own enjoyment. So to see that other people enjoy the things I make too really does help sometimes. Anyways, thank you all. This has been another rant from your favorite internet puppy dog man, and I will see you guys on the next video, whatever I end up rambling about.